Michelle Cook, owner of Body Ache Escape Massage Center. We are located in Pickerington between McKenzie River and Raising Cane's, and we have 9 massage therapists on staff. So whatever your massage needs, we can cover it. Give us a call. But to introduce Marty Bledsoe Post is the author of Retrofit, the Playbook for Modern Moms, and founder and CEO of Apparently. After a 25-year marketing strategy career, combining motherhood with executive roles at a fast-paced digital agency, Marty realized the modern workplace was not made to support today's parents. Marty founded Apparently to achieve parental inclusion via employer-led programming and strategic planning using modern curriculum development and research techniques to create an employee experience that works for working families and benefits their employers. In addition to being a seasoned executive coach and frequent guest lecturer at The Ohio State University, Marty is also a national and virtual keynote speaker and leads in-depth sessions with clients in financial services, technology, and consumer goods. Please join me in welcoming Marty Bledsoe Post.
Thank you, Michelle. Good morning, ladies. It is so good to be here with you. And I was just thinking that massage sounds really, really good. So might have to be making a visit to Pickerington soon. I am in Columbus, Ohio myself, and I am thrilled to be here today, just having an honest and open conversation about what it is like for women trying to do it all, succeeding at work and succeeding in all the other things in our lives that are not work related. And if we've had a crash course in that in the past year, I think we can all say that we've learned some new things and had to adjust some things. So we're going to talk about all of that today. We will have time at the end for questions, but if you have something on your mind that's burning through and you want to chat, put it in the chat. We will try and address it as we go. I founded Apparently with the mission to really advance work and family, because what I felt like I saw happening in my career was that many times women found themselves trying to figure out how to get ahead at work when all the demands on them from a family standpoint were really high. And that applies to all women, whether that means you're caring for a parent, whether that means you're a fur mama, whether that means you've got kids or grown kids running around, whatever it looks like. And at the same time, feeling like they wanted to do better and show up more for those family members. And I heard a lot of women telling me in the early years of this work that they just felt like they were kind of half-hearted on both sides of it. You know, they're just not quite meeting the need over here and not quite meeting the need over here, and all the time feeling like they couldn't get where they wanted to go on either side. And that was really what began my journey toward providing this kind of support. Most of our clients right now really still are in the central Ohio area, but we are starting to have opportunities outside of the Midwest, which is really exciting. I think the virtual world has given us more contact outside of our geography. And we do this work in a variety of ways. We used to do a lot of live workshopping, which was always really fun and engaging. This particular picture is from one we did called the Superhero Session. We also have led a lot of panel discussions where we've had real honest discussion with women and their families about what this is like to balance. And then of course, classes and workshops and keynote talks as well. And really the first one that I ever did was somebody asked me to present at a professional conference to talk about working motherhood. And I was really hesitant because honestly, I was worried that it would damage my career to stand up in front of a room full of professionals and tell them about my life as a mom and a daughter and a sister and a friend, because I was used to just being seen as the pro. And I think ultimately the reason I decided to do it is I thought that's really dangerous for us as women, as people, to compartmentalize our two selves and feel like, well, I have my professional self, and I don't want anyone who knows me in that capacity to know me as a whole person, as the rest of myself, which in many cases is a lot messier and a lot more human and vulnerable in our lives as personal outside of work. And again, 2020 has given us a crash course collision on all of that. And so since the pandemic, this has been the majority of my life. This is me working from home, my 2 kids trying to do school from home, just beyond my desk. I always laugh because I can see, you know, the playroom, the mess, the laundry room is right there. The toys are everywhere, the books are everywhere, and I'm trying to do, you know, a call or stay focused on something. And they are in 6th and 1st grade this year. They're finally back to school 5 days a week, but we had a whole year of hybrid. So home several days a week, working on the iPads, fighting with each other mostly. Actually, I think if they had a course on sibling fighting, they could have aced that through the whole year. And it was very distracting and challenging some days to really feel like, okay, I can actually show up and get my own work done. And I thought, well, that's why this business is here, is to help employers and employees navigate these conversations and these changes and this new world of flexibility, as we'll call it. So Michelle already told you my background comes out of the marketing world, and I decided to start Apparently to bring some of this story to a bigger audience. And I want to just take a moment now and ask you a question, which is, I mean, it's 9:15 in the morning on a Friday. How many of you started off today, or maybe have started off a day this week feeling like, okay, I'm doing the best I can. Like, I'm showing up as best I can over here, even though maybe I didn't get enough sleep or I didn't necessarily have all my tasks done yesterday. Can anybody relate to that feeling of like, okay, I'm doing all that I can. I'm actually, you know, doing more than I ever thought I could. And at the same time, it's just never enough, right? And Elizabeth said most days in the chat, yes. Well, here's the thing. I mean, honestly, we expect people to work like they don't have kids, and then we expect them to parent like they don't have to work. And this quote actually comes from a journalist, Amy Westervelt, who wrote a story about this years and years ago. And it's sort of one of those quotes that makes its way around a lot of times. And I really like it because I feel over my career like that was the case a lot of times. I mean, I had awesome support from my company when I was an employee and I went out on leave and I had my babies and I came back. I mean, I think I had, you know, a decent amount of support. But once I got back, it was sort of like, oh yeah, I know you have daycare pickup. I know you have to go to the mother's room. I know, but I need this. I need you to be this sort of all in all the time, more hours, more dedication, as if those little tiny people don't really take up any of your energy. And actually, the more I've done work with Apparently and different types of companies and different ages of clients and different types of families, what I have decided to do is basically rewrite the quote, because I think it's even bigger than the mother piece. It's sort of this idea that we expect people to work like they have nothing else to do. And then we expect them to live the rest of their lives like they don't work. And that's a lot to try to fit in sort of on the side or in secret, to try to say, okay, well, I'm going to give my all. And we've created a definition of what it means to give our all at work. And it's this sort of overzealous, extra hours, always going the additional mile type of burned out, stressed out, overwhelmed person who's like, oh yeah, no, I got it. I'll do more. I'll be there more. I'll do more trips. I'll do more to even just meet my job expectations or to try to get ahead. And so what we can all do as we've hit this terrible pause button in this pandemic is to start to look at what are the other things that we can treasure and reward about our team. Can we honor and reward them when they are taking care of themselves, when they are doing a better job of balance? Can we start to say, I'm not going to only praise the person who works 10-hour days. I'm going to praise the people for what they get done. And I'm going to praise the people who are, or even allow myself to get something done in 7.5 hours today and maybe 8.25 tomorrow, but not this driving sort of almost male or masculine way of like more at work. And it's a big mental shift for a lot of us because, hey, we got into the workforce, and we'll talk about this, by proving that we can do it. We can do it. We can do just as much as the men who made the working industries sort of ahead of us. And we can do it sufficiently, and we can do it efficiently. And so it's hard to let some of that go. But the research is starting to show that the better we can balance and take care of ourselves, the better we can show up in these roles. And maybe we can make this quote completely go away, which would be a great goal. In many ways, our family lives have evolved significantly. We have a whole different type of societal structure around us compared to what we used to have. But a lot of the policies, a lot of the things that surround working laws, working requirements are sort of, they never really came along for the ride of evolution of how families function today. And so we see them, instead of being in this, symbiosis of I work and I have this other life and it all kind of goes like this, we still see a lot of it like this, where it's like, okay, I got to do more over here. I can't do that over here, because work and the laws have not necessarily come along the way to understand what people are dealing with when they're not in the office. And what that means is that the modern expectation of us is really hard to meet, because the systems that support us are very outdated and they fit a way of life that simply no longer exists. And so it's up to all of us in the short term to try to figure out a different way of combining work and family in our own personal sphere and in the sphere of those who work with us. But ultimately down the road, I'm very hopeful that it'll be more of a societal discussion about how do we make changes in what is going on. And I wrote my book with, when you work on a book, the last thing you figure out is the title. So the whole year that I worked on writing my book, it had a completely different title in my head. But the more I researched and the more material I put into the book, and my daughter calls it the board book for moms because it's very bright and colorful and it's little and square. And but the more work I did to get the book ready, the more I kept gravitating toward that word retrofit, because I kept feeling like, none of this was designed for the modern use scenario that it's being applied to. And so the workplace wasn't designed that way. And in reality, the family wasn't designed that way. And so I kept feeling like there was something in this notion of trying to go back and refit what was begun. And so that's where the title of retrofit ultimately came from. So just a quick walk down memory lane for some of us, and I might be dating myself here in terms of how many years I personally have been out of school, but how many of you remember your childhood as running in and out of the screen door or the front door or the back door and being outside as much as you wanted for hours and days on end? Did anybody grow up like that and running around perhaps with a pack of children? Not always your siblings. Sometimes it was cousins, neighbors. Sometimes it was neighbors' cousins who came to visit and no one ever even knew who all these kids were, but they were just running together all the time and could be gone for hours from the house. It's very different today. 42% of children under the age of 8 have their own tablet device. And this is a statistic from before COVID. And I think we've all seen and heard in COVID, the screen time has gone up. So the statistic may have even be a higher number now. Does that mean that the way we grew up was better and the way these children are interacting with the world through screens is worse? That is not at all what I am trying to say. I think it helps us to stay out of the whole like good, bad, better, worse situation and just acknowledge this is very different. And when you are parenting a child who has access to the world through a screen, you have a lot of work to do as a parent. You have a lot of work to do on, making sure that that child is safe on that device and helping them understand what safety is. And so it requires something different from us as parents, which is why I bring it up. And I really, in all these examples, am making a conscious effort to explain that what's being asked of parents today is very different than what was asked of parents ever before. And really, this goes for aunties and friends and neighbors as well, as we all try to keep an eye on kids. Did anybody have a lunchbox like this? Mine was actually Rainbow Bright, with the matching thermos inside, right? Today, the children's lunch expectations have gone up, that you're feeding your kids like whole grain toast with organic almond butter and this perfectly packaged little snack, or that you're just loading money onto the digital thing so that they can check out with their number at school, and you're not ever actually sending lunch money. Nobody sends cash to school anymore. So the world in which they are growing up, again, is a touch more complex. Personally, I had a Care Bear bike with streamers coming out of the handlebars. We roamed the neighborhood after school on our bikes like complete and total free little warriors, honestly. And now there's actually a lot of ride sharing opportunities in different cities being piloted for essentially Uber for kids. So how do you get your kids from A to B to C to D while you're at work? And so what we see is that the world around parents, again, has gotten more complex. Sometimes that's more opportunity. Sometimes it's just more responsibility. Many of us came home from school and just hopped off the bus. We were sort of the latchkey generation. After school activities today, which cost money and have waiting lists and require all kinds of additional interaction from parents, include everything from yoga offerings to STEM and robotics. This is an after school picture from a bunch of kids doing robot design in the hours after their school day. So again, not better or worse, but very different from the way the people who are now working in leading companies themselves may have grown up. And that is the ultimate lesson. We have essentially coalesced the most labor-intensive style of mothering the world has ever seen at precisely the same several decades when women have entered the workforce and begun to rise and become the leaders in our companies and in our communities. This quote actually comes from an excellent book I highly, highly recommend called How Women Rise. What I love about this book is that there are 12 habits they break down that many of us have adopted that have gotten us to wherever we are today career-wise. And then those 12 habits, in a really unfair twist of sort of, I don't know, karma or fate or something, suddenly become the things that are not helping us anymore. And what I like about this book is it doesn't place any sort of blame. It's very empowering. It's very much helping you see, oh, I understand. I did that for years and I was so successful with that technique. And now that technique is actually in my way. And it gives you a very no nonsense guide of how to break some of those habits. But this little quote was sort of stuck in a tiny little sort of aside commentary in a paragraph about what we're asking of women outside of work and what we're asking of women inside of work, sort of following the same exact arc of rising expectations, which what is in many ways what contributes to today's women feeling like I can't do enough. I can't do enough over there and I can't do enough over there. And the reason I pulled it out of this book so clearly is I think it's important for every single one of us and every single woman on our teams, every single woman in our community organizations with us to realize this is not actually just about you. This is not just your situation. This is not just your family or your boss or your lack of organization. It's not like you just need a few more meal hacks and you'll get out of this. This is a societal pressure that has grown on both sides over decades. That can be an overwhelming thought, but it can also be a very freeing thought because it's not like you just aren't handling it. So that's really important. A majority of mothers with children under the age of 18 are in the workforce. This is a pre-COVID statistic. I know that the past year has been devastating to women's employment because, for the exact thing we're trying to talk about, women are doing everything else besides work at home. They're doing all of the home care. They're doing most of the child care. Now they've been doing a lot of the remote teaching as well. So it's been a really hard year. Also pre-COVID, 40% of women were the primary breadwinners for their households. So that's an amazing bit of progress to have made from just 11% of women sitting in that role in 1960. That's an amazing bit of progress. not probably enough, but still really, really powerful. And then when you look at what's happening as the pandemic has forced a lot of women to make tough choices, you can see that that's really challenging to families who are relying on that woman or mom to be the main moneymaker. In essence, we have been asking women to show up as superheroes at work and at home. And this applies to women who have families and women who are single because the expectation continues to go up. So let's talk just a bit more about the way women's roles have shifted. So women have always been in the workforce, honestly. When we think about women's labor, we often overlook the fact that women were in the workforce in very specific roles for a long time. Women were secretaries, they were nurses, they were seamstresses. But what we maybe don't talk about is that most of the time, those were unmarried women. They were either single, never married, or they perhaps had found themselves widowed. So the choice was sort of go have a family or get a job. And the women who were working were not the ones with families at home. When this dramatically began to change was in World War II. And that's really the critical point to which we can trace a lot of this societal pressure change. So during World War II, we all know Rosie the Riveter. She went to work on the manufacturing lines. What we may not realize is that that's the first time that the government literally was asking married mothers to join the workforce. So this is the main area where it starts to change. And in 1943, there's this image of Rosie the Riveter that we see. She's literally riveting the side of something and she's got a baby on her back. And this is really where the beginning of the crossroads happens in our society. So the federal government decided, well, if we want her to go to work, we're going to have to take care of her kids. So they passed the Lanham Act, which actually gave rise to these so-called Lanham nursery schools, which were prevalent across 49 states for 3 years during this war production boom. And more than 500,000 children went through this program. In today's dollars, it would be a $1 billion federal investment to create. In that time, what they charged everyone was 50 cents a day. So that'd be $8 a day in today's dollars. So if you just take a moment and think about that, most childcare today is about $1,000 to $1,500 a month versus something that was able to be subsidized and provided to parents for just a fraction of that. And they were able to get 2 snacks and 2 meals. So the reason I think that's so important is that you actually had an admission that we cannot send all of these women into the workforce unless we help them figure out what's to be done with their family obligations outside of the workforce. And then when the war ended and the GIs returned, we sort of said, okay, now we're going to pause that idea and we're going to have the women go back home. What's interesting though, is a lot of women said, well, I like working. I want to stay in the workforce. What we didn't do though, is we didn't replace the woman's role at home. So not everyone has an Alice. Not everyone had the luxury of having help at home to prepare for and manage the things that were still going on when the mom had to go to work. And the reason that this matters so much is that this is the beginning of our middle class. The changes in our country after World War II are really when you stopped having an upper class and a working class, and you suddenly had this stripe of families in the middle really trying to do it all on their own. They didn't have help in the home. They didn't have an Alice. They didn't have nannies or wet nurses or governesses or tutors. They had moms, but those moms were also saying, hey, I think I'd like to be part of that workforce. I'd like to continue my employment. And so somehow we just glossed over the fact that now she's got multiple full-time jobs, which had never, ever, ever before been attempted in any society in all of the world. So it's a giant experiment, and it's only, like 70 some years old. And I think we can all attest to the fact that it needs a bit of change. During the pandemic, they've released a lot of data about what's happening inside homes. And a lot of it shows that women are primarily taking on the role of additional unpaid labor. So that means everything from, loading the dishwasher to answering the questions for the internet connectivity to taking the dog out for a walk, right? And it also includes increasingly helping our parents navigate things in their lives. It also includes helping our community and the other moms around us. But unpaid labor has added 71 hours a week to women's plates. And I don't know about you, but I didn't have any room on my plate before any of this happened, and you probably didn't either. And so what we see is that this unpaid labor, because we are still in this stripe of mostly middle-class working families, the unpaid labor, we don't have help for that in our homes, and we're taking that on. From a very high level perspective, this basically follows the arc of how parenthood has evolved, because in the pre-Victorian times, you either did or did not have children, and you couldn't control or time your pregnancies, and your family was just a workforce. And many children didn't even survive to their 5th birthdays because they were tiny adults who had to work and produce. But parenting was not a primary fixation of moms and dads' time and energy in that world. In the Victorian era, we started to romanticize being a mother. So we started to equate being a feminine, ideal feminine woman with having this little Madonna and child sort of environment for your baby. But again, that glosses over the classes that were at play there, the upper class mothers who had help and the working class mothers who were the help. And what we really see is that this post-World War II idea of having moms stay home is the first time that we've ever said a single caregiver should stay home with their child from the time they're born until the time they go to school. And there's a variety of pressures going on there. Part of it is the GIs return from the war and they need to take those jobs back. So in the United States and Britain, there was actually a communication campaign that started to portray moms at home. You know, we picture the sort of June Cleaver, high heels, apron, 1950s housewife. That was very prevalent in the imagery of the time, and the father working, so that we started to think about giving those jobs back to the returning GIs, which is not, again, not a good or bad thing. It just makes a major shift. At the same time, the child development research that was done during the war very clearly showed that children need a primary caregiver to form an attachment to in order to develop properly. I'm with you, right? Like, we want our children to develop properly. That's compelling research. The problem is that research was conducted with war orphans in London, outside of London, actually, because they had been shipped outside of the cities to help them stay safe. So the research was leading people to believe children need one caregiver. The modern research shows that infants up to 1 year can bond with up to 6 different caregivers. They can form an equally strong bond with multiple people, including dad, including sitters and other caregivers. But we're going with the research of the time, which says it should be one person. And so the government said, well, hey, it should be mom. Let's send mom back home. Let's free up that job for dad. And what you see, the reason this matters so much is that if women's sort of primary role becomes at home, then any woman who's not doing that she's breaking that mold. So now she's a working mom or a working woman instead of just a mom or a woman. And when they do research around the globe with women in different countries, sometimes they've had trouble translating the phrase working mom. In Sweden, that phrase literally has no, the interview got really tangled up because the interpreter kept repeating and the interview subjects were like, what are you talking about? They don't refer to moms that way in other countries because they don't assume that moms would be home. So you're not breaking the mold if you go to work in those countries. It's very interesting and very unique to our culture. And today we have intensive parenting, which is what it has been labeled. It's very much a Western way of giving more time, energy, and resources to our kids longer into their lives than ever before. And again, I'm not painting that as good or bad. What I am saying is that for the parents in the group, for the people who are managing parents on your team, they are dealing with incredible pressure to stay deeper and deeper invested in their kids for longer and longer. There have always been mothers, but motherhood and childhood are fairly modern notions in terms of that motherhood is this phase of life where you devote everything to your children, and childhood is this protected phase of life where you're not a contributing worker, a tiny adult. You're actually this protected class. Does that work out well for things like child labor laws? Absolutely. Does it work out well for other things? It makes it really, really complex. It also pays to look at how we're dispersed in our families. So nearly half of grandparents live 5 or more hours away from their grandchildren. And last year, even if your grandparents were next door, you couldn't have them interacting with your kids. The other thing is our neighborhood structure has changed dramatically. So the kids are not running around in swarms, and parents are not in and out of each other's houses, popping in and sort of living in the cul-de-sac. So what that means is every single family becomes under pressure to solve for work and family integration questions on their own. So every single mom on the block, think about this for a second, every single mom, every single woman who comes home from a hard day, whether she's coming home to, pets or a partner or a quiet house, is making dinner, is solving for what do we have to do tomorrow, is figuring out the commute, is figuring out sort of the next step for the family. There is no collective problem solving and ability to sort of ebb and flow in and out with each other's families the way there perhaps used to be. The other thing is we know so much more about children today than we ever did in terms of how they mentally develop. So we understand that 20% of school-age children are what we would call neurologically diverse, which means they learn in a way that doesn't necessarily mesh with the mainstream way of teaching. This could mean they're super gifted, or they're on the autism spectrum, or they are dealing with ADHD. They might have 2 or more of these because they often co-present. So what this means for parents, whether this is you or someone on your team, is that they may be being asked to step into a higher level of advocacy on behalf of their children, not because anything's necessarily wrong, but because the school system is not set up to meet the needs of a neurodiverse spectrum of students. And so you start to get into parents being called into, IEP meetings and additional screenings for their kids and additional testing protocols for their kids. Just asking more and more of today's parents than has ever been asked before. The typical school year calendar, this one I should really just take this slide out. The typical school year calendar includes 28 days off during the year. That used to crack me up because I only ever had 21 days of PTO. After last year, I feel like that's kind of a wash. But the other thing that's going on with today's families is the youth sports industry. And it has gone down to the point of we have maybe, tiny tot programs where you've got 2-year-olds running races, trying to kick a soccer ball. Nothing wrong with this per se, but a parent isn't going to drop a 2-year-old off at soccer practice. So what it means is that the parents are pulled into this additional sort of time and energy investment on the weekends when they would normally be recharging themselves. And actually, youth sports in our country is just really big business. It's a $15.3 billion annual industry in our country. So it is not going anywhere. And families get caught up in this at younger and younger ages for their kids. So the net of all of this is that families were isolated and overwhelmed before COVID happened. Families were dealing with an awful lot of complexity outside of work before any of this began. And so the question is, okay, did the workplace change? Did the workplace evolve to understand what's happening societally? I mean, did work become more family friendly over these decades, or did work start to prioritize care and what that looks like? Did families get support? You all are in a position probably to influence and control your workplaces more than some, but the answer overwhelmingly is not really, because at this same exact time, remember those 2 arcs completely intersect. Being a worker has fundamentally changed. So Gartner research shows us that across industries, work is more distributed than ever, meaning that you are interacting with people in different places and spaces who have influence on your work. Work is very developing more of a tendency to be matrixed in its decision-making, which means lots of consensus building happens in today's decisions in the workplace that maybe even 10 years ago would have been more autonomous. I make this decision, I carry out this task. And it has evolved a bit to be, we all do this work together. Now, the other piece that sort of makes all this complex for all of us workers, and this one applies to everybody no matter what industry you're in, is this digital overload. I mean, it used to just be your email box. And now it's also your chat, your Zoom calendar, your ability to keep up with maybe an intranet or the way people might be messaging you, or maybe you're trying to do a meeting and somebody's texting you and you're like, oh, that might be urgent. I should probably look at that. And now we might be Facebook friends with people on our team, and you've got a Facebook message from somebody and people are saying, hey, did you see my message, my note? And you're like, where did I see that? I mean, I have literally lost information because I cannot remember what channel it came into me. And I think that digital overload on top of everything else that employees are dealing with makes it really hard to stay clear and focused on, this is what I got to get done because this is what I got to do when I leave here. We are working more hours than ever. So we are working more hours per year, 11% more hours per year than we did back in 1979. So that digital technology has not exactly helped us get more efficient or productive. It has actually cost us time, and it is requiring of us now more. And many workers say that bleeds over, that they're working on the weekend. You probably all are. You probably know that feeling of feeling like, okay, but if I don't work today or tomorrow, Monday is just going to be impossible, right? Then you combine that with sort of the modern work environment that we've just sort of created for ourselves over the last year, with many of our teams having to figure out remote ways of interacting with each other, with customers, with industry, with community, and it gets even more complex for a lot of people. So the net takeaway here is that we used to say there's no I in team, but honestly, it's all I's in team now, because we have to really think about how each person is dealing with all of these elements and what they are bringing to the new way of working, if you will. So one of the reflections that I've had from actually a good friend is that when he began working on his own business, this wasn't a COVID quote, but he said, while you are leaving behind a place, a system, and a structure and a culture, meaning of the office, what you are likely to find is a whole lot of you. So now let's say you're working from home. Let's say you're working from home even one day a week, or you're letting your team work from home a couple of days a week. Well, all those things are not there. The place, the system, the culture, the processes, the routines are different when somebody is trying to work from a remote location. And then what you find is that, wow, your own tendencies at work are kind of heightened because you don't have all of those mitigating structures around you anymore. And so it's very important to understand as much as you can when working from home with yourself, with your family, even one day a week. It still includes basically working from home with yourself. So knowing yourself comes in super, super, super handy in this new world of how we are working. If your team or company has ever had the opportunity to do any kind of personality assessments, whether those are DISC profiles, Myers-Briggs, I mean, strengths finders, there's so many, whether you've ever had the chance to do those or could invest in the chance to do those, it's very important to understand, how do you function under stress? What is your main personality type? What is your archetype? If you do the Enneagram, it'll tell you, you are a helper, you are a challenger. Whatever one you do doesn't necessarily matter, but it's about embracing what you learn from those insights about yourself as an employee, but then sort of adding to that what you know about yourself as a person. So that's why I have on the right-hand side, the 5 love languages. How many of you have ever interacted with the 5 love languages or know what I'm talking about here? I see a couple of heads nodding. Okay. So the reason this one is so important is that, you are motivated by and pleased by people interacting with you in one of these 5 ways, or maybe a combination of a couple of these ways. And so you can take what you know about yourself as a worker. How do I function under stress? How do I show up as trying to help get toward a project completion? With what do I know about myself from the way I want to be interacted with and appreciated? And then you can combine those to help the people around you, whether those are work people or family members, to better understand, how do I get my battery recharged? How do I get motivated? How do I show up when I'm feeling really threatened? And what can I work on there? And how can I give people around me some tools? So in job settings, we would often ask like, well, what motivates you? You know, we talk about this at review time sometimes. What really motivates you? It's important to understand that you're a whole person. And so what motivates you might come more from your love language than your work personality type. But what you need at home to be successful as a worker, if you're trying to fit all this in remotely, might come out of your DISC profile. And you might need to say to the people in your household, you know, I am really task oriented, so I need this much quiet, and then I can interact better in the afternoon or at lunch or whatever that looks like. So the better you can know yourself in the intersections of these kinds of insights about yourself, the better you can equip. You've got a lot of stakeholders here. You've got a team. You've got a family, you've got people who are relying on you on both sides. And the research continues to show us, psychological research continues to show us that everybody is sort of in their own mind all the time. So they are not actively thinking about how they can better communicate with you. We have to all take the responsibility for communicating that out to teams, to family members, whatever, because they're doing their own stuff in their head just like we are. And so they can't read our mind. And it can be really helpful to better give people that insight as to how to move forward. Of course, we have added on top of all of this, these dual arcs of women in the workforce and women's expectations of families going up, this unprecedented pandemic. So in March, 95% of US school children were just home instantly overnight, with perhaps an idea that they would go back, but then we all know what happened in the years since. And immediately, half of US workers transitioned to work from home. Now, you would think in 2020 that many companies already had flexible policies, already had sent workers home. No, actually, many companies were completely unprepared for this change. So in October of 2019, as we now know, just a mere 5 months before it was going to be time to send everybody home, 44% of companies still did not allow remote work. So you have to think about what those employers, and I think especially big employers, this is a major political, or not political, but policy change for them, because the policy had clearly said up until then, no, nobody works remotely. Interestingly enough, in the spring of our early summer of 2020, 50% of employees who were by then currently working remote said they had more flexibility to get their jobs done outside of the traditional systems of work. So only half of the people who had been sent to work from home felt like they had more flexibility to actually try to adapt to this new way of working. That's not a really great statistic. To be honest, it would be much better if it were closer to everybody saying, oh yeah, like we're getting the flexibility we need, we're figuring this out. What we actually see in many cases is this attempt to maintain the way it was at work, and try to do, so if we met every Friday for an hour, we'll keep meeting every Friday for an hour, we'll just do it on Zoom. Well, there's maybe another opportunity to rethink, does it have to be a meeting? Can we accomplish that work sort of asynchronously instead of synchronously? Can we save our meeting time for opportunities for us to come together as humans? Can we change the way we interact maybe digitally in between those meetings? But that's the kind of imagination that comes forward when you have time to plan. And many companies just didn't have time to plan. I mean, they just sort of plopped everybody in this new scenario. And our house became our school, our office, our post office, the place we shopped, maybe even a place we were attending some sort of faith-based service, a hospital. If we were like, I am not taking anyone in this family to the doctor unless it is like major, right? All last year. So my favorite is the seat of government, because if you have more than one child, or if you just have a partner, you know that there are days when it's just about mitigating conflict. So the place in which we exist literally had to start to fill all these other roles, which is not easy to do at the drop of a hat. And whatever we were at home before, whether I'm a single parent, or I don't have kids, or I'm trying to co-parent with a divorced partner, or I have 2 careers at home, but that was always sort of like nice background information. But I could put on my professional persona and I could switch gears, and identity-wise, I could go to work. So there were times where that separation of work and home was positive, because I could suddenly become, hey, in this setting, I am here for my skill and my experience and what I know. And that's why I'm here. And it doesn't matter, you know, what's going on in all this other stuff. But boom, we took all that and mashed it up. And the interesting thing about trying to combine those types of needs, your team still needs you. You're working from home. You got the Zoom call. Although, by the way, I have to say all the stock photography of conference calls looks like these calls are a complete joy. Like everybody in all the stock photography of a conference call is like, ah! So I did the best I could, but you've got this Zoom call over here that is like scheduled and everybody needs you and they're trying to get your perspective. And then you've got this other need over here, and it could be anything. It could be the child made a huge mess in the kitchen. It could be the puppy knocked the coffee over across the entire desk full of reports. It could be an elderly parent is on the other line and really having a hard time from, you know, a mental standpoint or a physical standpoint, or not feeling well. It could be, I got to help my parents find a vaccine appointment. What's interesting about those needs is that they are very time sensitive and they are unrelenting and they don't care if you're on a Zoom call. And yet at the same time, you've got a team of people who are relying on you. We scheduled this call. We're supposed to be together. We're supposed to be collaborating. We have this work to get done. And it's very hard to navigate when you feel crunched between those two things, because honestly, you have to go clean up the coffee when you have to go clean up the coffee. You can't necessarily hold some of this stuff. So again, we've hit this major collision of the two. And suddenly our family, what was our background, has become front and center at work. I mean, how many of you have had the experience of your colleagues watching you on screen do something that you really wouldn't have your colleagues normally observe, like maybe parenting or talking to a partner or dealing with a barking pet? You know, this is not stuff that our coworkers ever used to see us do. And so that sort of collision has been hard for many of us. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to ask if there's any questions before we have a chance to dive into these five ways of moving forward in the new reality.
Marty, I don't have any questions, and certainly if anybody does, please unmute yourself and ask questions. But before everybody got on the call today, we were kind of talking about reflection, and every time I attend any event, especially women's leadership, anything women focused, I think about the takeaways, and I always look at our group. And we have such a diverse group of women on this call and at such different stages of their life. So we have, families with young children still at home. We have, women whose maybe your children are a little more independent and they're able to do some things. Maybe you don't have children at home. Maybe you had children and they're gone. Maybe you never had children at all. And we have so many different age ranges and life circumstances on this call. And I always think about ways that the information is relevant to us all. And how do we tie this back into our life and how we can move things forward? And one of the things, I am a constant learner and enjoy these opportunities to just reflect on what I've gone through as a mom, or what I've gone through as a spouse, and what I've gone through in my career, and how those reflect back. And I just, as we kind of go through these stages, I know everybody on here is in a different stage in your life, but just think about ways that, everything that Marty has shared has impacted your life over until today. And then, I'm excited to hear the 5 ways forward, because, I think we're all in a different phase. I think we're all in a different phase of our worlds where, we're coming out of COVID slowly. What does the world look like, and how are we, moving things forward? So I just wanted to stop and share my reflection with everybody, because I think sometimes that's just important to kind of take a step back and realize how far we have come, whether you have children at home or had children at home or never did. I think that's, having a spouse, having somebody, a significant other with you throughout your life, it's a different stage and a different phase. So I'm going to stop. If anybody has any questions, please unmute and ask. Otherwise, Marty, you take it away.
Okay. Anyone have anything? Okay. Teresa, you make such a good point. I think it's so hard at times for women to it's been hard at times for women to find ways to come together and support each other when the past 7 or 8 decades have just been brutal for women in the workforce. And so these kinds of groups are incredible, because this is a way that you can get some support in a setting where everybody knows what it's like to have these pressures on us outside of our work, and to try to be proving ourselves in our work at the same time. And those pressures on women outside of work are unique no matter what your family scenario is, because we experience the world differently, and because the expectations have been placed on us differently. And so, as my ring light topples, I think that it's just so critical to have these venues for each other. So I think it's great that you have this regular coming together of women to share and just talk about what it's really like. The first thing that I often think of when I work with women in workshops and coaching settings is, you deserve some major, major, major recognition, each and every one of you, no matter what your scenario has been like in your work, no matter what the past year has been, no matter what the past 5 days have been. You deserve a major round of applause, because you're doing it. And so the feeling of giving yourself that little pat on the back, or that recognition, or that, gold star sticker or something, is really, really powerful. So when my son was 3 and he was in preschool, I was the mother who was late. I was late with everything. I was late to pay for things. I was late to turn in forms. I was late to pick him up. I mean, you name it, I was late. And one day I got this form in the mailbox that, you fill out this questionnaire for them to do the conference. And I filled it out that night and took it in the next morning. And I was so proud of myself. And I said, I did the form on time. And the teacher, kind of tongue in cheek, was like, do you want a gold star? And I was like, yes, I do, because it is everything I can do every single day to get here and get them, and then go to work, and then come back, and then go to dinner, and or make dinner, and all this stuff. And so at the end of the day, when I picked him up, she had put a little certificate in my parent folder, and it said, Marty was the parent of the day because she turned in the form on time. And it's adorable and hilarious, right? But it really made me think about the way we recognize ourselves for what we get done, and then the way we help other people recognize us for the stuff that we are getting done. And this is best done in the rear view, right? So it's not necessarily like at the end of every day, I got these 5 things done, because that's very tempting to go, I got these 5 done on my list of 28. So I'm not very far, right? That's a whole stressful thing. This is best done like over the last month. It can be really powerful to do this over the past year because of the year that we've just had. But to sit down and reflect, and I invite you to do this in a quiet moment when you have a few minutes outside of this call, or even right now. What have you managed to get accomplished at work in the past year with all of these crazy odds against you? And what have you gotten done at home? And I'm not talking about like I ran the dishwasher 4 times a day for 365 days straight, although that is probably true for many of us. But things like, my family came through the pandemic healthy, or my kids did complete remote school, or whatever those things are. And my business is still functioning, and I've added staff, or I've retained staff, or I've reduced staff as carefully as I could, or some of these are going to be hard, but the point is, when you look back over everything that you have gotten done, what you are going to find is a pattern of yourself showing up and meeting the need of the moment and doing what was asked of you. And you're going to realize that not only is each list pretty remarkable, they're remarkable because they exist in combination with each other. So it is remarkable to get a child through remote school and onboard 5 new employees in a pandemic. Whatever those combinations are, right? It is super remarkable to have 4 or 6 or 8 aging parents or grandparents relying on you for vaccine appointments and helping them all get scheduled and helping them all get vaccinated while still going to work. This is remarkable. And so this look back and reflect can really help you see where you have earned a major, major gold star sticker. And you deserve to feel filled up by those accomplishments. And then think about, what does your reward system look like? Who do you need to hear from, or what do you need? This is where the love language thing or the DISC personality or whatever can come in really handy. What are the ways that recognition really works for you? Is it words of affirmation? If it is, tell your family and tell your team, I really would value to hear from you what my contributions over the last year to this family have meant. Or kids, if you don't say thank you at the end of dinner, you're not getting breakfast, right? I need to hear thank you. That's what fills mommy's bucket. I mean, however that conversation needs to play out. It's so important to ask for the recognition that you deserve and give it to yourself at the same time. Sometimes it's just a matter of combining those two things so that you get that different perspective on what you have actually managed to accomplish. And also to just not be so hard on ourselves, right? I mean, if you think about the mom in ET, she had an alien in her house for days and didn't even notice. So you're doing pretty well. I guarantee you're doing really well at whatever is on your plate. And so if you can look back and reflect on those things in a positive way and give yourself some recognition and ask for some recognition from the people who mean the most. And maybe it's not verbal, maybe it's flowers, maybe it's having somebody wash your car for you, maybe it's having your team, everybody come together for 30 minutes in the conference room and we're going to tackle a project that we've all been putting off for a year. Like whatever that's acts of service, whatever the thing is you need to go ahead and ask for it. And then for the rest, don't be so hard on yourself. Lower the bar just a little bit. The second one is to look forward to anticipate. So we have been through a rush of changes and the road feels like it has been in front of us almost every day for the last year. So take a deep breath and realize that's not over. We still have a significant number of curves in the road to navigate as we work our way back toward what people are calling everything from, return to normal, the new normal, whatever like vernacular you want to use. The fact is we're not done adjusting and changing. So whether you are, returning to a different, back to the office or back to whatever, it's less about returning and it's more about re-engaging, meaning this is your permission to rethink how you want to engage in a new and different way. If this past year has given us anything, it's permission to rethink, right? Permission to question and reanalyze and what was working and what's not working. So if you have people, quote unquote, returning to work, think about them as kind of onboarding. If you're going back to work, think about what would you need to really feel comfortable and feel onboarded. And you don't have to make this up from scratch. You can look at things like parental leave policy and how you return people. How do you onboard people? How do you set annual goals? How do you do postmortems on projects? How do you ask yourselves and your team what went well about that? What do we want to repeat? All of those are helpful tools as you're trying to reshuffle the deck for people as they come back or even just continue to work at home. Is everything that you've got in place for Teams remote how you want it? If so, let's talk about how we put some of that into more formal policy. The CEO of Ohio Health, the major health system in Central Ohio, he has asked that 5% of his people's time and performance reviews for the next year be focused on recovery. So I love that because that is an important bit of permission to say, okay, yeah, things have changed. And now we all need to bake in a little bit of this recovery time and activity, and we need to reward it. So that's why it goes in the review. I think that's really powerful. The other thing you can do here is start to think about weekly or monthly strategy sessions. These work at home and they work at work, obviously. A couple of things to think about are when we do the whole what went well, what didn't go well, there's some nuance to that can be really helpful. When we think about what went well, there's two different layers to that. One is we got good results from something. We did X and we resulted in Y, and that's wonderful. Another one is to say, hey, that went really well because it gave us comfort. It made the team feel better. It helped the team come together. It was an effective way for the team to, XYZ, or it made the family feel better. Now, with things that didn't go well, I always ask people to think critically about that, because sometimes we're our own worst enemy here and we're like, oh, that didn't go well. Well, okay. Did it not go well because it had real consequences? Like something actually fell out from that not going well that was detrimental in some way? Or did it not go well because it made us uncomfortable, which is different? Right. And we've been asked to do so many different things over the past year, and we will be asked to do so many different things. So we have to say, before we wash the baby out with the bathwater of that didn't go well, we have to think about, well, okay, what didn't go well about it? Was it just kind of hard and yucky and weird and new and different? Or was it like, okay, yeah, you're right, that was a problem. The other thing is actively letting go of stuff. This is a key way for us to get ourselves reconfigured into this next phase of whatever we're going to work like and function like as groups of families or communities. So are there things that you can just be like, yeah, no, I'm not worrying about that anymore. I've decided that that is no longer a priority. That prioritization exercise is okay to do. Constantly, do it constantly, and ask yourself what you're willing to let go of. And then this is the piece, ask yourself what you need and who do you need it from? This goes back a little bit to recognition, but maybe it's not recognition. Maybe you need more help. Maybe you need to have a tough conversation with someone. Maybe you need someone to interact with you in a different way, or you need some sort of change in the unpaid labor structure at your house, perhaps. So if you take a few minutes and think about what you need and from whom, then you're ready to start to have a proactive conversation instead of a reactive conversation in the moment of, that's not what I wanted. These next two perhaps are understood, but I actually think there's some value in pulling them apart. So one is to treat your family like a team. So if leadership is getting someone to do what they don't want to do to achieve what they want to achieve, that is parenting and partnership right there, if I've ever read the definition of it, right? So there are a lot of things you can take from what it's like to be successful at work and apply them at home. I highly recommend, if you have kids in your life at any, even nieces, nephews, community kids, to follow HR Mom on Facebook. She does almost all of her content on Facebook. And she talks about leading, not parenting, or, being an auntie or whatever. So she actually uses a ton of business techniques at home. And she actually says, you should be having daily and weekly postmortems or check-ins with your family. How are you feeling? What went well and what didn't? What do you need from me to make today go better? And then this is one that was specific to the pandemic, but what fun thing should we do today that's not, school related? Basically, the net here is like, you have leadership technique from work that you can bring over to what's going on at home. And then the same thing also goes the other way. So treat your team like a family. The number one thing the research has shown over the past year that employees need from their leadership is for you to acknowledge your own family, your own struggles, your own challenges with what is happening around us. Because if you can be that kind of transparent leader and say, this is really hard, everybody, and I don't have it figured out, that goes a long, long way toward helping the team feel like they have permission for it to be really difficult for them, because it is difficult for them as well. Only 2 in 5 employees working at home have had a manager check in on their well-being over the past year. I find this to be like one of the most distressing statistics in the entire presentation, because I cannot imagine how leaders can sort of abandon their people that way and not find out, hey, are you okay? Don't tell me what you think I need to hear. Are you really okay? These kinds of vulnerable conversations are key for us to stay connected to our teams as if they are part of our family. And then the last one is really about what I call radical self-care. And the reason I call it that is that for those of us who've often spent our lives and careers taking care of others, to take care of ourselves can feel like an act of like radical resistance almost. I mean, it can just be like, you want me to what? You want me to prioritize myself over meeting the needs of this team, this company, this community, this family, this group of people over here, these neighbors, my mom and dad, and like, seriously? And that's okay if it feels like that. The other thing I will say is that this phrase, self-care, has been everywhere. The Harvard Business Review has a great article out in the past week about why serious leaders need self-care too. So the phrase is very popular, But the notion is that you have to be at the top of your priority list sometimes. So when you get on an airplane and they say, put your own oxygen mask on first, they don't tell you, you actually have like 15 seconds to do that before the change of pressure in the cabin is going to make you unable to help the person next to you. So it's not like yeah, I mean, if you feel like you're important today, put your own mask on. No, it is like an imperative. And the same goes for taking care of yourself. So putting yourself first instead of last on the list of getting things that you want out of a day or out of a meeting or out of a vacation or whatever that looks like. Super, super critical. The language of self-care has been around a long time without that label though. And so what I encourage you to think about are other ways to refer to this. So you might have heard things like, well, I just, I need to go get my bucket refilled. So filling the bucket is a common metaphor. One that I really like is this notion of coping blocks, and that we as adults, we understand how to refresh our coping blocks. Sometimes we don't do it, but we know how to do it. And it could be like grabbing a Starbucks. It could be listening to your favorite song. It could be opening the sunroof. It could be, so it can be tiny things or it can be big things, a day off, maybe a massage, something like that. But the notion is that when you have lots of coping blocks at your disposal and something comes at you, you can meet the need, you can deal, and you can do it in a positive way usually. When you have very few coping blocks left, so it's like 10 o'clock at night, or you're super exhausted after a big presentation or meeting, that's not the best time for you to meet the need with your highest and best self. So whatever way you choose to think about this refilling and this recharging and this positive self-care is great, as long as you just keep putting little deposits into this throughout the day. What's interesting about this, a couple of things. One, when I do seminars with all parents, including dads, I often hear men feel really weird about this one. They're like, what? Self-care? Like, not because men don't do self-care. Men do self-care. Don't get me wrong. They do it kind of automatically, but they don't call it that. And they haven't been reading magazine articles about it for years. And so they are very confused by this need to like label this time that they get to sort of recharge themselves. So it's different usually for men and women. Huge generalization there, but I'm just telling you what I've heard in my workshops. The other thing is kids have a really hard time refreshing their own coping blocks. So if you're parenting, keep in mind, this is why you proactively give the snack 5 minutes before you think they're going to be hungry, and you make sure you have a water bottle and all that stuff we do as parents to try to keep putting coping blocks in so that we avoid the moment when the child like has none left, right? So practicing self-care and giving yourself enough coping blocks will help you then fill somebody else's. From a work perspective, we really don't want people over the past year, especially, saving up their time and not going anywhere and not taking any time off. So this is the time, whether it's a day off to just do nothing or it's an actual vacation to get away, this is the time for people to have that opportunity to recharge and recover. I saw something really interesting on social media about self-care, and I included it here because the number one, before I read the last one, which I like, the number one is you will disappoint some people when you prioritize your self-care. And as women, that is really hard for us to do, to feel like we've disappointed anyone. But it will pay off in the end because you'll be better able to meet the next challenge. So you'll have refilled your bucket or whatever the metaphor is. The reason this is hard for us is it's a prioritization change. It puts us at the top of the priority list instead of the bottom. And that's why it feels radical. And I don't know who needs to hear it, but you've got permission from me to put yourself at the top of the list. In fact, advice from me to do that. And then number 8 on here, which I think is really hard for many of us, is it's the hardest to do when we most need to do it. When it's like, no, I have to be the one. I have to do the presentation. I have to be at work. I have to do the meeting. That's probably when you need the half day off and the massage, or you need, to take a nap or take a walk, right? But we get in our cycle and that can be really hard for us. So keep that in mind. This also applies to the notion of resiliency. So we used to think resiliency was a resilient person could just meet challenge after challenge after challenge after challenge. And what we now know in the research through Harvard Business Review, another great one about stress, is that the better you recover, the more resilient you are. So this is not just about kiddos, although I did pull that quote here, a well-rested child is a resilient child. This is also about workers, it's about ourselves. The better you can recover, the better able you are to show up and be resilient in the moment when it's needed. So the example they give in the article is, instead of working, now I know flights are kind of a thing of a rare occurrence now, but like working really hard on the flight and feeling guilty if you don't work on the flight, versus closing your eyes and resting on the flight. And what happens when you get off the plane? Well, you're more resilient if you had the opportunity to close your eyes and rest. So the way we recover, in fact, this also, if you have ever done any work with or ever have any athletes in your life, you may know, trainers say the same thing, that what an athlete does in their performance, the next performance is dictated by how well they recover from the current one. So think about what you are doing to allow yourself that recovery time as well. This is where I will also take another breath, ask for any final questions as we get toward the end. Anything, anybody, questions, comments, anything?
Well, I have to say that just gave me a lot. I didn't ask questions earlier because I had a feeling that you were going to end up answering some of the questions that I had written down, which you did. But I do have a question when it comes to employers and employees. So interestingly enough, I'm just wondering, you talked about, praising people for what they get done, which is great. But how do you deal with employees who may have contention, those employees who feel like that they're giving 110%, and they see other employees, who may be, getting what they can get done, having in their minds an equal footing. So as an employer, how would I work with that?
So let me ask you a question back. So do you have people who are feeling resentful, like they have to do more because they're not getting any, forgiveness or something?
Well, I feel like they think, and it's not been verbalized. So, I'm just assessing things
sure.
from a distance, but I feel like, there may be some resentment because, other people, have to take extra time off, or may have to do some creative scheduling, right? Because we are a bit flexible because we understand what's happened this past year. So for me, it's like, as long as you're getting your work done, I really don't care what time of day you're, doing it. But other people are like, well, I'm keeping to the norm and doing everything and pushing myself to the max. And perhaps they feel like that they're not receiving their recognition, or I don't know. It's something that I plan to talk about with the team, but I was just wondering how to approach that.
Yeah. Teresa and I were talking about this before the call began, and how hard it is to switch our minds from the way we always worked, which was we had this structured time and everybody came in at that time and we could collaborate in that time. And now when we say flexibility, if we just say flexibility and then we say, well, whatever that means, whatever time, whatever you need, that can be a little disorienting at first. Like, okay, so what does that mean for each person if they choose to interpret that differently? What does that mean for times when we still need to come back together? It sounds like a combination of a team conversation and some one-on-one conversations might really help get to the root of where people are maybe overextending. I mean, maybe people need to be encouraged to take some of that flexibility for themselves. I think there's coaching that can be done too on for people who are sticking to that. I'm doing the norm. I'm doing everything. I'm doing it right when I always said I would and always did. Might need some intervention to say, well, what would it look like for you if you were to reimagine your working time? What would it look like? I think if you can help them verbalize or write down what would it look like if, they can maybe get permission from you to reimagine some things. And a lot of us just need we have to visualize what the new way would be. And so sometimes that question can really, really help. What would that look like if we tried this, or if you did this, or if you had this outcome or this much flexibility? That's one idea. Does anyone else have that situation going on? I'm curious.
Yes. So the way that we have it arranged in our company is that you have a window of time to start your workday. So there's no specific, you have to be here at 8 o'clock, you have to work, start your day at a particular time. You've got a window of time, and that window of time is large enough that everyone with different family needs and with whatever they're juggling as a part of their morning routine has the accommodation to get that done before they come to work. And it's working out great. Nobody has to say why they didn't get there until 9 o'clock, and as long as they get their work done and as long as they're there by that window of time, there's no questions asked.
I love that notion of giving people ranges, because the reality is, even if everyone's working at home, you kind of need everyone to be checking in with each other or starting their day within the same range. And that can be a really wide range, but you could say, hey, by 10 a.m., we need to have everybody knowing what their day is going to look like. But if somebody wants to start at 7, hey, that's fine. I love the ranges. You could even do that with the end of the day too. I think that's what's hard for us as creatures of habit, because we've been so used to that schedule and we've had access to each other during those hours that we haven't really had to step back and go, okay, how do we asynchronously work and hand off the baton to each other and check in with each other? And then your perception question is really an important one too. So I love the ranges. That's a great idea.
Yeah, it definitely, Zulene, it works out very well. And to some extent, we have it with the end of the day as well. Obviously, those people that come in earlier in the morning are going to leave at a different time than those people that come in later, but it gets rid of, well, I don't have children, so I can be here at this time, or I don't have these needs. And why should I be penalized? And turns it into, what is your best time of your best block of the day to be productive?
I love that.
So I was going to chime in also, Zulene. I don't know if this is something that could be relevant to what you were talking about, and maybe other people are experiencing this as well, but we're seeing with our employees, and then also just with other friends and people in our lives, we're seeing this as well. And even with our business, we're kind of reevaluating who we are and where we're going and how we move past this giant thing we all went through together and separately, and kind of evaluating what we want our future to be. And we're seeing that in our employees too, and in our friends and family members, is we've all gone through this giant life change, whether we chose to or not. And it's kind of a time of reevaluating what we want our lives to be. And so, I mean, we've been taking some time with our employees to kind of talk to them about who they are now, as opposed to who they were a year ago, and who they are within our business and what their unique needs are right now. And those conversations have been really beneficial for our business. And it kind of uncovered some feelings that we didn't know were happening with people. So I don't know if you guys are seeing that as well with your employees, but we're seeing a lot of people evaluating these sorts of things.
That's amazing, because you're right. None of us are the same people we were a year ago, and our priorities might have really changed, or they might have stayed the same and become more, imprinted and rigid. I mean, people react to these kinds of stressful things in many different ways. So I love that you're giving them that time to reflect. And I think what you're saying is so true. Your business can learn from them what are the priorities looking like? And I think that's another really great way to have that conversation. And again, I think there's team conversation, and then there's one-on-one conversation for some of this. Absolutely.
We only have just a few minutes left, so I did want to jump in real quick and first of all, thank everybody for joining us this morning and providing, you know, the head nods and, you know, just watching everybody's reactions to the conversation. And I can see how much it has resonated with everyone. And one of the things that, you know, Marty really reflected on was giving each other, you know, giving yourself that gold star and recognizing yourself. And I look at every single person on this screen, and every time I see you either on the screen or in person, you know, I get to know you as a member, and I know what you all have accomplished, and I know the great things that you've done. And I want to say, from my outside view, looking at all of you, you are amazing women who accomplish amazing things every single day. And it may just be something little, it may be something huge, it may be something frustrating and challenging in your world, but you are all doing amazing things. And this last year, I know, has been so challenging for so many. I look at, you know, we've got a CPA firm on here. They're, you know, doing everything they can to keep businesses up and running and helping them with every step of the way. We've got diaper drives going. We've got healthcare workers who've, you know, just really stepped up and done amazing things. So, I mean, I could literally point at every single person on here, and you all are just amazing people. I also want to point out too, our fabulous board members who are on here: Christine Simmons, Zuline, who is our board chair, who I'm going to turn it over to in a minute, Joe Welsh, who's also on our board, just fabulous leaders that we have that help us make this chamber stronger every single day. And I believe this is National Women's Month. Was it March? Was it April? I don't even know. I don't even know.
It was March, but hey, it's only the 2nd, so let's take it.
I'm like, what day of the week is this? So I just, you know, anyway, I did want to turn it over to Zuline, who is also our co-sponsor with Body Ache Escape, and let her kind of help wrap us up. And then, of course, Marty, if there's anything else that you want to add, we can certainly get you in as well. But Zuline, tell us a little bit about Z Promotions, and of course, you know, any other little nuggets that you would like to share from today.
Well, most of you know me, but for those who do not, I am Zillian Adams. I'm the CEO of Z Promotions, and I am the current 2021 chair for the board. I want to thank Marty for a fantastic presentation. It was very relevant to what we're going through right now, and it was needed. You know, sometimes you just need somebody to reinforce that self-care. We hear it all the time, but you need someone to give you that permission to be able to take care of yourself. And I can say I am really guilty of not taking that time for myself. And I love that one slide that you had on that self-care, because unfortunately, I am guilty of thinking, oh, the more I sacrifice means the more I love someone. But, you know, I always put myself at the bottom of the totem pole. So I need to start raising myself up there a little bit. So thank you so much. On top of that, just to let you guys know a little bit about Z Promotion. So our purpose is to get you noticed and make you memorable through creative product branding, and that would be through promotional products and corporate apparel. Everyone is missing engagement right now. Look at us, we're all on a video conference, but you know, hopefully with things getting a little bit more normal and settled, we can, as Teresa had mentioned a little earlier in the very beginning, that we can start getting together at a later point this year and do our meetings in person. But in the interim, keep us in mind for doing kits and things like that, because it's a great way to get engaged with those people that you're doing those video conferences for, sending them little gifts ahead of time and engaging during the event. And hopefully everyone will be able to join us, and also send out referrals to your own personal network for our meetings. We're always meeting the morning of the first Friday of every month. So hopefully we'll be able to see everyone next month. And that's all I have for now, Teresa. Thank you.
All right, Marty, wrap us up.
Okay, I just wanted to thank you for having me this morning, ladies, and thank you, Teresa, and to the sponsors. And also to let you know, if you want a copy of Retrofit, we're going to provide a bulk order to the chamber. So let Teresa know and she'll collect the information. And then we'll be able to give the book at a preferred price for chamber members. So if you're interested in it, it is actually a workbook. There are little like prompts in here and little places to write. So I made it small so it could go in your purse because I didn't think any of us needed another big book to carry around. So again, I really appreciate everyone's time and wish you all the best as we navigate into the next phase of life and work together.
Thank you so much, Marty. And certainly thank you to everyone. Anyone else, last minute thoughts, notes? Allison?
No, I was just going to say thank you. And I would love the book, Teresa.
Awesome. Well, I will put you on the list. So I did record this just so everybody knows, and I will share this link with everyone who was on the call, and actually to several. We had almost 30 people registered for this morning. So we'll share this with those who could not join us, and certainly hope that we can get the book order going within the next week, and then we'll get these ordered with Marty and get that taken care of and let you all know pricing and all of that stuff on there. So I just want to say thank you all. I hope everyone has a very, very happy Easter, a great weekend. It's Good Friday. I say everybody has permission to go home now and practice self-care.
Yep.
Unfortunately, I have a call in 15 minutes. So after my call is over, maybe I'll give myself permission to go home. Not really, because I still have more work to do. But I hope everybody has a great weekend. Enjoy the sunshine. It is getting warmer. And I look forward to seeing you all. Next month, we have a fantastic speaker. Katrina Zeidel is her name, and she's talking about the truth about who you really are. So stay tuned for more information on that. It's actually on the website already. Should be another great event and another opportunity for us to connect virtually, with one more month after that, we're in person. So thank you all so much. Thank you to Marty. Thank you to Z Promotions and Body Ache Escape. And you guys all have a great rest of your weekend.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.